Let's have a look at 2 Chronicles chapter 18, where the words are taken from. And this is about, as you probably know, Micaiah was prepared to stand up against Ahab. And what does he say in 2 Chronicles 18 and verse 12? And the messenger went to call Micaiah, spake to him, saying, Behold, the words of the prophets declare good to the king with one assent. Let thy word therefore, I pray thee, like one of theirs, and speak thou good. But verse 13, and Micaiah said, As Yahweh liveth, even what my God saith, that will I speak. Isn't that courageous? That's just wonderful. I think that item was just delightful, so thank you very much for that. Okay, where are we up to? Well, we've had a look at the background, and so tonight we're going to have a look at chapter 17 about Jehoshaphat getting established. So we finally get on to Jehoshaphat, we hear what he says, we see what he does, and it's really thrilling because he makes such a fantastic start. It's really good. Now, there's something that I need you to be aware of in preparation for the exhort tomorrow. So rather than have a diversion at the end of the talk, I thought I'd provide a diversion now. Just that there's some timing of events that I think will be very useful to know, and it's rather hard to explain without a diagram. So here we go. So this diagram, which I hope is working all right now, it looks as though it is. So we know that Jehoshaphat started to reign in the 4th year of Ahab. And tomorrow we're going to be looking at the battle of, it's gone right out of my head, Ramoth-Gilead. And that is in the 17th year of his reign. And we know that because Ahab dies in that battle. So that's got to be the timing, doesn't it? Now, if you come with me to 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verse 1, Now Jehoshaphat had riches and honour in abundance and joined affinity with Ahab. The word joined affinity is to make a marriage alliance. And after certain years he went down to Ahab to Samaria, and Ahab killed sheep and oxen, and then you know that Ahab asks him to come and join with the battle. Now, the way it reads, it seems as though this has all happened in a very short space of time, but it hasn't, because once we do a little bit of homework, we discover that this has got its roots years and years and years before, and it's important to understand. So, how do we do this? This is why I need you to be able to see this diagram. So, there's a king called Ahaziah, and he is Jehoshaphat's grandson. So he's the son of Jehoram, who took over from Jehoshaphat. Okay? And he's 22 when he becomes king. So says 2 Kings chapter 8, verse 26. Now, if he's 22 when he takes over, and Jehoram reigned for 8 years, 22 minus 8 makes 14, which means that 14 years before the end of Jehoshaphat's reign, he was born. Oh. Now his mother is Athaliah, Ahab's daughter, Jezebel's daughter, and she was married to Jehoram, his father. Okay? So what that says then is that presumably if Ahaziah was born 11 years before, in the 11th year of Jehoshaphat, then presumably the marriage happened on the 10th year, allowing normal gestational times. So that creates something else very interesting, because we know that Jehoram was 32 when he started to reign. So if we take the time period back to when he married Athaliah, Jehoram is 17 when he marries Athaliah. Now, I'm not going to comment on all this now, but you'll probably get the drift of it because we want to look at it in the exhortation tomorrow. So why is Jehoshaphat having a marriage alliance this time? Why is he doing it? Because the contest on Mount Carmel of the prophets of Baal versus the prophet of Yahweh, Elijah, was the year before. Just 1 year before. So I wonder if you can just have that in your head, because it's a little hard to explain it without the diagram. So I'd just like you to try to remember that for tomorrow's exhort, because that's important. So let's get on, and we'll just summarise where we're up to. So from the background study, the Judah-Israel split had happened 60 years before, and there'd been 60 years less 20, at least 40 years of war. Judah was surrounded by enemies. Asa begins a spiritual reform and gives them peace for 10 years. Jehoshaphat is 9 years old when the victory over the Ethiopians and the Libyans happened. And multitudes of people go from Israel right down to Judah because they want the things of God. And God gives them 10 years of peace. Jehoshaphat is 20 when Asa makes the terrible attempt to hire the Syrians against Israel, and he's rebuked by God for that. Jehoshaphat is 20 to 29 when he sees the civil war in Israel, and he's 33 when he sees his father refuse to seek Yahweh in his illness. So that's sort of the background. And then we come to chapter 17, and wow, isn't it a wonderful start to this kingship of Jehoshaphat. So the first thing he does, it says verse 1, Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead and strengthened himself against Israel. Why would he do that? Well, it would appear as though there was some more wars between Israel in the north and Judah in the south after the record of 2 Chronicles 16. Because you might remember, going back to the words of Hanani the seer to Asa in 2 Chronicles 16 verse 9, he concludes with his rebuke by saying, "Herein thou hast done foolishly, therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars." So presumably there were wars. The word of God doesn't lie, does it? So if God says there's going to be wars, there must have been wars. And where might the wars have been? Well, do you think Israel would have been really happy with Judah for having got the Syrians to go and fight Israel? Because they'd know, wouldn't they? I mean, this would be just the prime case for some retribution, wouldn't it? And notice that the prophet says there's wars. So in that period, 15-year period from when that prophecy was given until Jehoshaphat's on the throne, presumably there's lots of wars again between Israel and Judah. And there might have been other wars, because chapter 17 verse 10 says that the fear of Yahweh fell on the kingdoms of the land, so that they made no war against Jehoshaphat. That would be pointless if they hadn't been making wars. So it would appear as though there's other nations that have made wars as well. So the first thing he does is he's going to strengthen himself against Israel. Why does he need to do that? Well, because he's got all of these people that have come down from the north, and the last thing in the world they want is if they've come down to the north to rejoice in the things of Yahweh, and then Israel comes down and thumps Judah. And what are they going to do then? It'll all have been wasted. So what does he do? He puts forces in the fenced cities of Judah. So if we have a look at a map, we can see where these fenced cities are. Now, I hope you can see little green little castles, and there's some little brown, little purple ones, and there's some little grey ones. So these are the fenced cities in Judah. Now, the ones that are grey were built by Asa, and the ones that are green are built a bit earlier than that. Notice where they are. They're all on major roads, aren't they? Every road that leads from outside of Judah into Judah has got a castle right on the edge. So it's to protect themselves. So you can see what's going on. When it says that Jehoshaphat put his men, his soldiers, into the fortified cities, this is them. And so they're protecting all of their territory right around, because they've got enemies around them everywhere, haven't they? So it's the first thing he has to do. He sets garrisons in the land of Judah and in the cities of Ephraim. Now, I haven't got the map showing right up into Ephraim, but Asa had taken part of Ephraim, part of the northern territory, immediately above Judah, and they put fortified cities in there as well. So the point behind that is to reassure his people that he's doing everything he can to provide them with a peaceful environment. And then it tells us, verse 3, that Yahweh was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the first ways of his father David and sought not to Baalim. Now the margin says the first ways of his father and of David, but that's not really supported as far as I can see in the Hebrew. So what does this tell us about Jehoshaphat? He's seen his dad. He's seen the good days of his dad in the early part of his reign and the bad days. So who's he going to model himself on? David. But notice it's the first ways of David. Code. This is David before Bathsheba, not David after Bathsheba. But in the early days of David, when David was victorious for God in everything that he did with the people. So that's what he's modelling himself on. And what a contrast. Notice that it says that he walked in the first ways of his father David. How did his father end up? He ended up not being able to walk because he had a disease in his feet, because he wasn't walking in the ways of God. So there's lots of code things in here that's telling us what is the thinking of Jehoshaphat. He's going to walk in the first ways of his father David. He's going to make that his direction in life. And you know, brethren and sisters and young people, the influence of fathers on sons in the Bible is a very interesting study. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Now, I've just got a few examples here, and these are from Kings. So here's some negative ones. And he, Abijam, walked in all the sins of his father. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, walked in the way of his father and in his sin. Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, did evil and walked in the way of his father. See how so many men end up walking in the same ways as their father. And that can be for good or bad, can't it? Here's another bad example. And he, Ammon, walked in all the way that his father, Manasseh, walked in, and served the idols that his father served. We come to some positive ones. 2 Kings 14 and verse 3, and he, Amaziah, did that which was right. He did according to all things as Joash his father did. 2 Kings 15 verse 3, and he, Uzziah, did that which was right according to all that his father Amaziah had done. Just shows the influence that fathers can have on sons. And, you can see that in a lot of things. I don't know about you, but I can remember in my working life meeting sometimes 2 or 3 generations of people that were running businesses that I was consulting to. And you can see that sometimes the son is just like a replica of father. Other times it goes the opposite extreme and the son wants to be nothing like their father. It seems to be a digital thing, which is a bit crazy because neither are right generally. But in the truth, brethren and sisters, it's so important, isn't it, for fathers to set the right direction for sons. And sometimes this can be hard work, but it's an important thing to do. How do we, as fathers, influence the direction of our sons? Well, we can do it positively and negatively. Doing the daily Bible readings with interest is a positive thing to do, isn't it? You've got your kids around you and you do the readings, you ask them questions, you explain what's really happening with enthusiasm. That's going to have a positive influence. Attending ecclesial meetings, it's not just the attending, it's the message it sends, isn't it? If we're there when it's Bible class, when it's lectures, when it's a special effort, when it's exhortations, When there's a preaching effort, what does that tell our kids? Well, it tells our kids that the truth comes first in our lives, doesn't it? Whereas if we just roll in on a Sunday morning, turn up just in time for the meeting, and leave soon after the meeting, and that's us done for the week, what is the message? It's not a good message, is it? It's a message that says, yeah, the truth's important, but there's other things that really take a lot more of our time. And similarly, helping in the work of the truth. If sons and daughters see their fathers working in the truth, being involved in committee work, being involved on the GP, doing things to help organise things, then that sends a message too, doesn't it? That it's important work. We're doing the work of God. On the other hand, we can easily undo it so much by criticising activities and criticising the decisions of the ecclesia. When fathers and mothers are around the dinner table with their kids, what do you want them to have as an appreciation of what you think of the ecclesia? If we're going to talk about all the things that went wrong in the ecclesia, why did the arranging brethren make this decision? Oh, that was bad. Brother so-and-so, he's a nuisance because he says this and this and this. What's going into those little minds? It's saying that the ecclesia is a place of conflict, a place of problems. We don't want that. We want young minds to appreciate that the ecclesia is a happy place, where we want to be with our friends, where it's all about the things of God and it's positive and it's good. So there's some big lessons there, brethren and sisters, and I'm labouring that a bit, and you're probably all fully on board with that, but I think it doesn't do any harm to repeat it because it's so important. Now we come on to the next statement about Jehoshaphat, who sought not unto Baalim, but sought to Yahweh, the God of his father. So that tells us that there was the option for him, wasn't it? Because after all, the worship of Baalim was around in the north, and it was attractive to the feelings of the flesh to be involved in that sort of worship. And he chose not to be involved with Baalim. He sought not. This is the Hebrew word darash. You might remember I mentioned that right through his life there is all things about seeking, and it's the word darash. He didn't seek darash Baalim, but instead sought darash Yahweh, God of his father. There's a big learning, I think, in terms of what Jehoshaphat did here. Because you see, he could have just said, we're not going to have Baalim. We're going to make sure that there's no worship of Baalim happening on my watch, and left it there. But when you destroy the evil, you've always got to replace it with the good, don't you? And he did that. And you see, you can't overcome sin just by destroying evil. So I want us to all have a look at Matthew chapter 12, and you'll know this one really, really well. It's something that the Lord said, Matthew 12, verse 43 to 45. Verse 43, Matthew chapter 12. When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Then he saith, I will return to my house, from whence I came out. And when he is come, he findeth it empty, and swept and garnished. Then goeth he and taketh himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation. So, what's it saying? Well, this man did some spiritual house cleaning, so to speak. He got rid of things that were bad in his life. And for us, it's perhaps getting rid of a bad habit or an unspiritual influence or even immoral desires, all sorts of things like that. We have some spiritual house cleaning. But you know that sin can come back to find the house empty. Because if we do some spiritual house cleaning of ourselves, we're open, we're empty, we need something to fill the space. And if we don't fill it with good things, guess what's going to happen? Now, the reason I'm emphasising this is because I have seen this happen in my life with young people who I grew up with who left the truth. And I'm going to say more about that a bit later. It's so sad that you can get rid of bad things out of your life but not fill it up with spiritual behaviours instead. So what are we going to do? Colossians 3 verses 8 to 14. Put off the flesh and put on the new man. And I'll just put a little aside here. Does the battle against sin get any easier as you get older? I've gotten older from when I was a young man. I don't know that it actually does get easier. I think it's just different temptations, that's all. It's still a struggle. Why? Because we've all got flesh in us. And it's going to be a problem right until the time that there is no flesh and that we're, by the grace of God, made immortal. So, how do we overcome sin? Well, I've got a simple solution. My solution is you overcome sin by crowding it out of your life so that it doesn't have time. If David had been busy doing the things that he should have been doing with the army, he might not have fallen into trouble with Bathsheba. He was wandering around in his palace, wasn't he? And it was the afternoon. All the men were out with whoever it was leading the army, and he was there alone. He didn't have anything to do. What we're going to do is crowd it out of our lives. How do we do that? Romans 12 verse 21. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. And one of my favourite quotations, Galatians 5 verse 16. Walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfil the lusts of the flesh. Now, if we want to crowd out the lusts of the flesh, just get ourselves so busy that there's no time for it. Be busy in the truth. You know, there's often the saying that if you want to get a job done, ask a busy brother to do it. And it's so often the case, the busy brother somehow finds time to do it, don't they? Why? Because it's actually good for us. If we're flat out and busy in the truth, we can't get into trouble. And I think that's what is in the case of Jehoshaphat. He was going to be busy in the things of God. He sought not to Balaam, but sought to Yahweh, the God of his father, and walked in his commandments, and not after the doings of Israel. So, a little exhortation for us. Let's pack our lives with spiritual things. Now, what happens to Jehoshaphat now? Verse 5. Therefore Yahweh established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah brought to Jehoshaphat presents. That's remarkable. How many kings do you know that are recorded that when they became king, that their subjects came along and gave them presents because they liked them so much? I think it's unique. I can't think of another one. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Those of you who know your Bibles well, you might be able to find somewhere else. So, but at least it's very, very uncommon. So they love their new king so much that they give him presents, which tells you that they're trusting what he's done, building the defences to keep Israel out, giving his attention to not being involved with Balaam and making sure that his heart was in the things of God. And so what was this next verse? Well, his heart was lifted up in the ways of Yahweh, which is our title for this study. Not lifted up in pride, not lifted up in his self-importance, but he's lifted up in the ways of Yahweh. How do we know that? Because it says he took away the high places and the groves out of Judah. So it tells you that there were some bad influences still in Judah. Very rarely is it that the whole kingdom of Israel in any form is completely united with the things of God. There's always a few people white-anting things and introducing wrong doctrines. No different to Christadelphia today, is it? There's always on the edge a few people that want to introduce wrong doctrines. So he took the courage to deal with it. Gets rid of the high places and the groves, which were places of idol worship. So he's cleansed the place. And then he initiates a Bible school. He's going to teach the people. Verse 7. Also in the 3rd year of his reign. So that tells us he's done all the rest of the stuff in the first 2 years. So he's been a busy boy, securing the place, making sure that he was following the right things. And now, what does he do? If you're going to run a travelling Bible school, which is what this is about, he's going to educate all these people. How would we go about it? Well, I think he does it absolutely brilliantly. He starts off in the 3rd year of his reign, and he gets the princes involved. So he's talked to his princes, Ben-Hail, to Obadiah and Zechariah, and to Nathaniel, etc. And they're going to be the ones that will teach in the cities of Judah. Now, he's the one that is starting the Reformation, so you might think, well, why not you, Jehoshaphat, go out and talk to these people? But he's been very, very careful here and very thoughtful. If you send the princes out and they're going to teach the people, that tells everyone that it's not just the king that wants this done, it's all his princes as well. It's the royal supporters as well. This has got a much bigger base than just the king. And notice also, verse 8, he sent with them Levites. And you've got the names, Shemaiah, Zebediah, etc., etc. And it says at the end, towards the end of the verse, it says that they're Levites again. So it just reminded us. So why is he sending the Levites out? Well, we know from under the law of Moses that one of the jobs of Levites was to teach the people. So what's he doing? He's reinforcing the role of the Levites as teachers. We also know that the priests were teachers as well. So he's got some priests as well. So we've got Elishama and Jehoram, priests. In Malachi chapter 2, I think it is, it talks about the role of priests being teaching priests to teach the people. And when you think about it, the priests, as they were ordained under David, only spent 2 weeks in the year actually at the temple offering sacrifices, etc., etc., apart from the feast days. So when you add it up, they've got about 10 feast days, plus the 2 weeks. They're perhaps at the temple maybe a month in the year. So what are they doing the rest of the time? They're teaching. That's their role. So you can see what he's done, and it's very, very smart, I think. Very careful, so that they will be the ones that teach, so that it's a broad base of teachers going out, and it's a travelling Bible school. Verse 9, and they taught in Judah, and they had the book of the law of Yahweh with them. And we think, oh yeah, they had their Bibles with them. Yeah, they did. But not everyone had a Bible in those days, did they? In fact, to have a scroll, you wouldn't have one scroll of the law, you'd have a big, big box of scrolls to lug around. So what you would normally see is that where the tabernacle or where the temple was would be where the scrolls would be of the law. Other people might have parts of it, but very few people could afford to have a complete set because it'd have to be copied out by the scribes and that would cost you a fortune. So they take it, presumably from the temple, and they go and bring it out. And why are they doing it, going around all these cities? Because it says, they took the book of the law and went throughout all the cities of Judah and taught the people. Now, want to know all the cities are? They're the same cities that are back when we saw them on the screen before, dotted all the way around Judah. So this is going to be a long, long exercise, isn't it? But it tells the people that here is the law. People can read out of it. They can look at it themselves and read it. It makes it real, doesn't it? It makes it tangible. And here are the leaders of the nation, and they're all united in teaching the people about the law. You know, brethren and sisters, as it says on the screen here, when you look through the scriptures, every successful reformation in Israel's history is based on focusing minds on the Word of God. Every successful one. That's what happened when Hezekiah started his reformation. Josiah, the same. Ezra, Nehemiah. You can go through a lot of them. Why am I emphasising that? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you another story. I grew up in Melbourne, and it's not a bad city to live in. And I grew up in a fairly liberalish ecclesia. And I got involved in what was called CYC, which was the combined youth groups of all the ecclesias in Melbourne. And the ethos then amongst CYC was that you want to keep the young people together. It's important to keep them together. So you give them a little bit of Bible stuff and then a lot of fun. And provided you keep them together and have lots of fun together, then they'll all go the right way. They'll all end up being baptised, etc. Well, let me tell you, that idea was a disaster. 70% of my age group, and there was an age group of about 100 to 120, and I've got all the names if you want, I can give you every single name. 70% of them either didn't get baptised or left the truth after they were baptised not very long. 70%. Just giving young people fun and keeping them together is not going to get them into spiritual frame of mind. I don't know what they were thinking, because the world is always going to do the entertainment far better than us as a few Christadelphian ecclesias could ever do. So you're going to get beaten every time. I'll tell you another thing about it. In this whole process of this all happening, there was some well-intentioned people that said, look, young people are struggling with the lectures. You know, it's turning up to the lectures is not interesting and it's demotivating them. What we should have is a coffee shop where young people can come together on a Sunday night and have coffee together, talk about some Bible things and just be together. Well, the coffee shop got started and there would have been 40 to 50 young people that turned up every Sunday night at the same time as the lecture. I don't know what the arranging brethren and the ecclesias had in mind when they allowed that to happen, but it wasn't smart. So, 40 to 50 young people turn up, and we had a songbook then. It was called the Joy Book, and it was a publication out of the UK. It had quite a lot of songs in it, about 100 and something. And we used to sing these songs, but of course the accompaniment was always guitars and saxophones and all sorts of other things. It was quite a band. Well, what happened after a while is that this went on for a few months, actually more than a year, and the musicians were getting really good. They were being able to play really well. It was impressive. Now, one Sunday night, they came along and said, look, there's a Baptist church that's asked us whether we would come and do some songs for them because they've heard how good we are, etc. And this is a great preaching opportunity. We can go to the Baptists. So they did. And they did such a good job with the Baptists, and there was the musos there and also other young people because they had to have some singers as well. So it was, most of the coffee shop people turned up. Well, then there was an invitation from another Baptist church and another Baptist church. Guess what happened in the end? All of them went to be Baptists, the whole lot, because they didn't know their Bibles. They didn't know the core of what it's all about. And this is why I am so passionate about, these days, don't try to hold young people by providing all sorts of fancy songs. Don't try to hold young people by providing expensive entertainment. Hold young people by getting and helping them get the word in their heads. It's the only way that'll work. And that's what Jehoshaphat did, didn't he? He orchestrated it well to make sure that he went right through every city with a travelling Bible school. And it works. And you've only got to look at the spiritual reform team that he chose. The names. Look at this. Ben-Hail, son of strength. Obadiah, servant of Yahweh. Zechariah, Yahweh remembers. Nethaneel, given of God. Micaiah, who is like God. They've all got good spiritual names, haven't they? That tells you something else. Jehoshaphat chose wisely, didn't he? He chose the people that he could trust to make sure this happened properly. And that's a wise thing to do in ecclesial life, isn't it? If we're going to try to inspire other brethren and sisters, other young people, Let's make sure that the people that are speaking and the people that are leading the whole thing have got the right spiritual credentials. Not that they're just sort of fun people or interesting people. You can see what Jehoshaphat has done here. So he's making every step just right, isn't he? Just amazing. And what does God think of this? Verse 10. And the fear of Yahweh fell upon all the kingdoms of the lands that were round about Judah, so that they made no war against Jehoshaphat. So they got peace. Did you notice when this verse occurs? It doesn't occur after Jehoshaphat had placed all the forces in the fenced cities to defend it, although that was an important step. It doesn't say because he defended it, suddenly they had peace. No. It was after he taught the people that then we're told they had peace. Righteousness first, then peace. You've got to have righteousness amongst the people before there will be peace, as we said this afternoon. It's the inviolate rule, isn't it? We've got to have things right, and that will give peace. Peace will not come without having things right. So they made no more war against Jehoshaphat. And then we come to verse 11, and some of the Philistines brought Jehoshaphat presents. Wow! Not only is there no war, enemies are coming along with presents, like saying thank you. Amazing. And it's not just them, the Philistines. Now, were the Philistines people that we know were favourably disposed to Israel all their existence? Not really. You think of the time of David. How many battles did he have against the Philistines? And it went on from the time of David all the way along. The Philistines were inveterate enemies. Yet they've been turned around to not only not fight, but also to bring tribute. Isn't that amazing? And the Arabians brought in flocks, 7,700 rams and 7,700 he-goats. So it's not just a little present, it's not just a couple of animals, this is thousands and thousands of animals. And so verse 12, and Jehoshaphat waxed great exceedingly, and he built in Judah castles and cities and stores. So he's greatly blessed. And he had much business in the cities of Judah, and the men of war, mighty men of valour, were in Jerusalem. Then we come across something else that's a bit unusual. Now, as the next few verses from verse 14 through verse 19 are read, you notice that could have been summarised a lot briefer about how many men he had in the army. So what's the point of having all of these people in the army listed? And, well, there's 3 captains in Judah, verse 14 to 16, and they are bringing a total number of men of 780,000. That's just from Judah. And 2 captains in Benjamin, and they've got 380,000. And that gives us 1,160,000, besides soldiers in fenced cities. Now, you might remember in the study that we had this afternoon that the Ethiopians came along with 1 million men, and that was a huge army. And now Jehoshaphat's got even more than a huge army. So why is this being recorded? Well, it's so that we can do some numbers and thinking. That is, Jehoshaphat now has probably got the biggest army around. So if he wants to start taking revenge on the enemies, he can do it, can't he? He's got the manpower. And there's some very interesting things to look at in terms of what's happened to Israel in this time. When we look at the size of Judah's army versus Israel's. So Judah, first of all, under the days of Rehoboam, he had 180,000. Abijah had 400,000. Asa had 580,000. Jehoshaphat, 1.16 million. What's happening? The size of the armies that are in Judah are going up and up and up and up. They've got power galore. And what's happening to Israel? Well, Jeroboam, there was 800,000. That was a lot. And by the time we get to the time of Ahab, who's contemporary with Jehoshaphat, he's got 7,000. In fact, In 1 Kings 20 verse 27, when they came against the Assyrians, the camp of Ahab, or the camp of Israel under Ahab, was 2 little flocks. That's what it looked like. So, what can Jehoshaphat do now? If he wants to, he can go up to Israel and thump them into submission. He's got the numbers and Ahab doesn't. And that would be a very live option. He could come in and just say, we're taking over and you can't stop us, and we're going to have a spiritual reformation in the whole of Israel. But would that be the godly thing to do? It probably wouldn't. And so that sets the scene for the story tomorrow of the Battle of Ramoth-Gilead. Because what does Jehoshaphat decide to do? He doesn't decide to use the power of his army. He decides a different thing to do. But that's a story in itself. So we'll summarise now with what we've looked at tonight. Jehoshaphat starts by fortifying the land against evil influences. Lesson for us. We need to keep evil influences out of our lives and out of our ecclesias. Make sure that there isn't big screens at home, the unlimited access to internet, all the things that can appeal to the flesh. He sought not to Balaam, but sought Yahweh. Lesson. We overcome sin by crowding it out of our lives, making sure that our lives are full of spiritual things, absorbing the Word of God, doing the Word of God. He sought the God of his father. Lesson. Influence fathers can have on sons' lives. It's so important. And it's not just the influence of fathers on sons. It's influence of fathers and mothers on sons and daughters. He sought Yahweh himself, then taught the people. Notice that? I didn't bring that out. It talks about how he sought to Yahweh himself first and then went and talked to the people. You know, it's a classic example. If we go to Ezra chapter 7, we see the same thing said of Ezra. In Ezra chapter 7, and Ezra, the great reformer who led a great spiritual reformation, verse 10 of Ezra chapter 7, for Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of Yahweh and to do it and to teach in Israel statutes and judgments. You notice the sequence, and I'm sure I'm lecturing to those that are converted. Ezra prepared his heart, so he got his mind in the right place to seek the law of Yahweh for himself. So he became the student first. And to do it, it's not just good enough knowing the law of God, is it? We've got to do it in ourselves before we try to teach other people. And then taught in Israel the statutes and judgments. So that's what Jehoshaphat did too. Result, Judah is blessed of God, happy and peaceful. As I said before, the fruit of righteousness is peace, and there it was. He'd done the righteous things, and now it was peaceful. In fact, it's almost like a cameo of the kingdom, isn't it? There's all these people, his subjects, all happy, all worshipping God, all secure. And that's the way we leave them at this point. And we take up the rest of the story tomorrow.